Hello again, folks. I am Blunty, and many of you have been waiting, relatively patiently, for my full-on user review of the shiny new console from Nintendo, the Wii U. You may have seen my videos made in anticipation of the release. You may have seen my first impressions hands-on review based on my experiences with the hardware leading into the launch. But now it's time to see how all that expectation measures up with the real-world experience of owning, living with, and using my Wii U for a couple of weeks. I was fortunate enough to have Nintendo Australia shove a Wii U into my eager hands shortly before the Aussie launch on the 30th of November. So I've had a little extra time than most Aussies to really soak into what the Wii U is all about at its birth. So my review process is going to break down like this. Similar to my PlayStation Vita review, I'm going to break this down into a handful of separate videos to keep things in bite-sized internet attention span chunks, and so I can dig into and focus on some useful details in each one. Seemed to work really well for what I did with the Vita, so I'm trying it again here. First, the hardware. The Wii U console itself is relatively unremarkable at a glance. It's subtle and slim, it's a little bigger than its forebear, but with an eye to smooth and gentle curves as opposed to the 1980s Volvo corners and harsh edges of the original Wii. It's been designed to lay flat but can also be stood on edge with the help of some little feet. A slot in its face for discs, another one for SD cards, and around the back, power and a port for your sensor bar if you'll be using Wii U controllers with it, although the Wii U's native controllers don't actually need a sensor bar, and some USB ports, which, amongst other things, can be used to connect a standard external hard drive to in order to massively expand the storage capacity. Up to 2 terabytes per disc, in fact, are supported. A nice and easy way to solve what will be an ever-increasing issue of storage space in this world rushing headlong toward downloadable full-size games becoming as common as retail purchased discs. Now, Nintendo don't actually publish the dry statistics of detailed specifications on their hardware, or anything much about the guts of their gear, really, so we'll skip the breakdown of processor, memory, and GPU pipelines and all that kind of stuff. But there are 2 versions. The only real difference between them on a hardware level is you can either have 8 or 32 gigabytes of onboard flash storage, depending on if you get the basic or premium model, white and black, respectively. Remember, though, a chunk the size of around 4 gigabytes or so is taken by the system itself and its own software, so keep that in mind. When I say keep that in mind, what I'm really saying is buy the black one, it's better value. The Wii U's standout feature is, of course, that controller, a hybrid between a tablet and a traditional gamepad. And although the Wii U is capable of spitting out glorious 1080p high-def clumps of pixels to your TV, the 6.2-inch screen on the controller is just 854 by 480 pixels, a widescreen but standard definition image. A concession, I suspect, made to help keep the price of the whole system from climbing up too high. The image this screen provides is nice, it's clean and clear, and the colours look pretty decent. It's sitting very comfortably in that good enough range that most people won't even think twice about it. But for the record, if you compare it to screens on class-leading phones and tablets, it's not going to wow anybody. The touchy part of this touchscreen is resistive, an older and less advanced technology than the now industry standard capacitive screens. The advantage being that it's, again, inexpensive, but also that it works very accurately with a stylus. The downside being is that multi-touch gestures, even simple 2-finger stuff like pinch to zoom, won't be living here. Nintendo do have an on-the-record excuse or justification for why they stuck with this old technology and deliberately avoided the multi-touch gestures that are so commonplace these days. But I am not going to repeat their reasoning because, frankly, it's a pile of bullshit. Google it if you're interested, but yeah, it's BS. On the bright side of things, the touchscreen, though built upon basic and relatively ancient technology, works absolutely fine. It's quite sensitive, so things stay nice and responsive even with light touches. And although, of course, fingerprints and swipey smudges will accumulate, it's actually not too bad at that, and it does clean off nice and easy. More important to me, and I suspect most of you, however, are the proper physical game controller stuff. Frankly, if these suck, the whole thing may as well be a turkey. The twin sticks of analog joy feel nice. They have about the same travel as those of the standard Xbox 360 controller, but the same gentler tactile resistance as the sticks on PS3's controller. It's a balance I've found I like very much. They're responsive and comfortable, and yes, they click in as button presses. I've heard some people complain that the convex shape makes their thumbs slip off. I think these people are either liars or have disgustingly greasy thumbs, because even in more frantic play, this has never actually been an issue for me. There is a slight raised circular rim to help prevent this unintended thumb relocation slippage, unlike in the PS3 controllers where I'll admit to having my thumb slip off from time to time. Occasional, but it does happen, and while I do still prefer the concave cup of the 360, I like the texture of the Wii U's slightly grippier rubber better. All things on balance, they are very nice thumbsticks that should serve well for all types of gameplay. The cross-type D-pad, a Nintendo invention by the way, is ever so slightly spongy under one's thumb, but the tactile action click is very pleasant feeling and highly responsive. It's an ideal balance between comfort and perfect digital control, and under many hours of Tekken so far, it has performed exactly as I'd want. It is, by a planetary margin, the best D-pad on any current standard controller, and if you love your old school arcade action and the modern descendants of that action, like Tekken, as much as I do, you're going to love it. And much like the D-pad, the face buttons too are slightly spongy to touch, but again, the actual action click is positive and pleasant feeling. The buttons themselves are smaller and lower profile than those on the 360 or PS3's controller, and the spacing is closer to the 360 than the PS3, but overall, it's a pretty decent experience. Personally, I'd like them to be a little larger, but their size was never actually problematic in-game. When it comes to the buttons, the only real gotcha is for players coming from the Xbox, as while the buttons are labelled the same, A, B, X, Y, there's a position reversal of X and Y along with A and B. This is just how Nintendo does it. But for stuff like, say, Call of Duty, where there's a lot of fast twitch muscle memory instinct happening, the switcheroo can take some time to adjust to. I got caught in this trap, as a matter of fact. The shoulder buttons are a slight disappointment. They feel fine, but they're not analog. It's a short travel digital click only, which may only really affect racing simulation fans the most, but it is a perplexing omission. The distance your figure must travel between the trigger and the shoulder buttons is also a bit of a weird one. It's a bit long. The triggers are positioned very comfortably and your fingers rest exactly where you want them to. It's very, very comfortable, but it's a much longer reach when you have to move up to the shoulder buttons than on any other controller, and this can feel quite awkward, frankly. I'm pretty sure I'll probably get used to it, but I haven't yet. The alternative is a four-fingered approach, which feels ergonomically like it's what Nintendo wants you to do, but that feels even weirder to me. Again, it's yet to be a real issue in-game, but it does make my brain hiccup slightly, and that's a minor distraction I can do without. There's an NFC chip reader. NFC is near-field communication. It's for very short-range wireless communications where the receiver doesn't actually have to have any power. There's probably one in your passport if you've gotten your passport renewed recently, if you're an Australian at least. Anyway, but no one, not even Nintendo, are using it on anything yet, so I can't comment on it aside from the pictograph that sits there reminding me that it's there, unused and neglected and lonely. The volume slider up top feels pretty cheap and nasty. I doubt it'll ever actually break or anything, but it certainly doesn't feel as slick as the rest of the hardware interface. The camera isn't anything spectacular. I don't think it's high def, but it works nicely enough, even in less than ideal lighting of your average lounge room, so thankfully Nintendo thought that one through. The microphone too is about what you'd expect from this kind of built-in pinhole mic thingy. And there's the option of using a headphone or full-on gaming headset to be plugged in on top. I'll be testing one of those in the near future. Next to that is the proprietary power input. It's very much like the one on the DS and the 3DS, but for the black premium model users, there's also the charging cradle, which is actually a really nice accessory. I mean, it's pretty much just a hunk of plastic with some wires in it, but it's very well designed. You can literally just drop your pad into it and it'll self-locate and start charging immediately. There's no fiddly crap trying to get it to sit in just the right spot or having to find the right angle to feed it into the dock with properly so it ports match up and make proper contact and all that kind of crap. Nope, you can just dump it down and the juice flows. It's a small detail, but one of those usability things that make the whole experience feel well thought out to be as hassle-free as possible. Speaking of power and hassle though, the much talked about 3 to 5 hour battery life of the pad really isn't as long as I, or anyone outside of Nintendo, would want it to be. Companies like Nyko are already selling battery booster add-ons to address the problem, of course, but in practice it's not as big of an issue as I thought it would be. You can of course charge while you play if you happen to run out of power in mid-game by hooking the charger directly to the pad, and the charging cable it comes with is, thoughtfully, quite long. And unless you're playing one of those games that make you stand up and turn around in circles, it's not really a major inconvenience to have the power hooked up while you keep playing. It's a minor annoyance, yes, but, nothing deal-breaking. The video signal sent to the Wii U's gamepad is crystal clear at all times, maintained a high frame rate during every nanosecond of my testing and gameplay. The range is good, but will of course vary for people depending on local interference sources and what their walls are built from and junk like that. But for me, it was a flawless experience. And yes, I played Mario while sitting on the toilet and in bed and waiting for my noodles to boil when I was in the kitchen. It's fantastic. And yes, I know the Wii U gamepad looks like it's bulky and heavy and awkward, but in reality, when you're using it, it is so light and so well designed, it fits in your hands really comfortably, and you can use it. And I have used it for hours on end, and it is perfectly comfortable. It doesn't feel large and bulky and heavy and awkward. It just feels like a slightly wider control than you used to, and you do adjust to it very quickly indeed. It actually surprised me. I've always liked how it felt, but I always had a slight concern about how it would feel about hours and hours and hours and hours of use, and all those fears have been laid to rest. It is a well-designed controller that is comfortable to use for lots of different types of gaming. And while speaking from a purely logical and physics standpoint, there is some amount of lag between what the Wii U is generating and sending across to the wireless signal to then be decoded on the pad and displayed. It's lag in theory only though, as I was utterly unable to detect it with my squishy human eyeballs and goopy brain processing unit. For those upgrading from the Wii U can also use Wii remotes as secondary controllers. We already know all about these, so I'm bouncing on by them. In the next video, I'll be taking a close look at the Wii U Pro controller, and that, along with the full suite of traditional sticks and pads and buttons on the gamepad, is Nintendo's concession to the fact that the lack of standardized traditional controls on the Wii was a bit of a pain in the ass for some types of gamers and game developers. I mean, there was the Wii Classic controller, and that was okay, but it wasn't a standard option. It was an accessory that devs couldn't rely on people having, so they couldn't really build games that required it. But with the Wii U, the default option is not only a second screen, but a full collection of traditional controls, which is nothing but good news for gamers and game devs. And that's also the key difference between what the Wii U does and what can already be done with a pairing like the PS3 and the PS Vita. The fact that the Wii U's second screen is the default standard option, something game devs can absolutely know 100% of end users will have, that they can confidently design exclusively for and use it to its full potential, while the PS3 and Vita team-up can certainly do the same type of gameplay experience. It's not something that game devs can rely on end users having, so it'll never be more than a secondary option stapled onto a game whose primary control is a normal controller and a single screen, and as such it will never deliver what the Wii U can promise. Anyway, I'm starting to get sidetracked here, so that's me done on breaking down the Wii U's standard hardware. It's a very promising collection of stuff that reopens doors that Nintendo kind of shut off with the Wii, but also kicks open new doors of unique gameplay types and faster ways to do old stuff like second screen inventory management. Man, it's so much easier and faster to do on the Wii U with the second screen than stopping the game and flipping through the screens, but more on that when we get to the video about my launch games. But for now, thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and come back next time for more Wii U examinations.